unless we get some reasonable accommodations that we're going to fight for. In addition, there's another really massive bill coming through. The Republicans want to basically give tax breaks to the super wealthy and cut Medicaid by $880 billion to pay for it. And so we're laser focused on trying to stop that bill and messaging the American people why that is a horrible idea. And let me conclude on what gives me hope, and then I'll answer any questions you may have. Presidents are the most popular at the beginning of their term. Donald Trump was +6 approval after inauguration. Reuters does a tracking poll basically every week. So 1 month later, based on the tracking poll, he was -7 disapproval. So in 1 month, he flipped 13 points from approval to disapproval. And then just yesterday, 2 more polls came out showing that he is underwater on everything. In fact, that was a Fox News headline, that Trump is underwater on everything. So on not only his disapproval is more than disapproval, but on every issue, whether it's the economy or other issues, he is way underwater. I think right now he's at 31% support from American viewers. Keep going down. That gives more courage to Republicans to stand up to him. And again, we only need 3, and we can pass reasonable legislation off the House floor. So with that, happy to answer any questions you may have, and thanks for having me here.
Right. Sure.
You're on foreign relations. There have been several issues of concern. Sending more troops to Panama is a crazy threat. We're going to invade Panama. And number 2 is the about face on Ukraine and the love of Russia. And what can you and other sane people on foreign relations do to push back those 2 and other crazy things?
So I'll answer your second question first. The polling also shows, the question I'm answering is the administration's about face on Ukraine and how they support Russia. What can we do? So first of all, the polling shows that majority of American people support Ukraine, and Trump's handling of that issue actually is also underwater for him. I don't know why Trump acts like he's scared of Putin, but he does. It's very strange to me. I cannot explain it. I think Abraham Lincoln had it right when he said public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. So we're just trying to keep up public sentiment and to keep the pressure on administration not to be so pro-Russia. In the area of foreign affairs, the president does have a lot of, he is the commander-in-chief. He does execute a lot of foreign policy, and the courts have traditionally given the president in both parties a lot of deference. So the most we can do is try to keep public sentiment against the actions that he's doing. Now, you may have seen he did recently unfreeze the aid to Ukraine, so that is good. We do know that Russia keeps rejecting what the administration is saying, so maybe at some point you realize that it's not his friend. So we'll see what happens there. But that is an area where the most we can do is try to put public pressure on, because he does have a lot of authority to do what he wants there. The first question was on Panama. Okay. So having served on active duty U.S. military, our military is very good at blowing things up, breaking things, seizing objectives. But the problem every time is, what do you do the day after? And I think because of that Trump is not going to invade Panama, because we're going to occupy the country, or we're going to depose a leader, or we're going to run the country. Like, how would we actually do this? And I think if you gave it 30 seconds of thought, you think it's crazy. I think Republicans would also stand up to him if he wanted to invade Panama. So I just don't think that's going to happen. My view is that the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. Unfortunately, that's a minority view, so that is the law. And what that allows is essentially the president to send troops into conflict for a period of weeks. I don't know the exact number of days. And then Congress gets to say, hey, you tell us what you're doing and why you're doing this, otherwise we're going to stop it. But yes, presidents could, under the War Powers Act, initially invade a country. That would be correct.
Hi, Congressman. My name is RFP. I used to work in Congress 10 years ago, and a decade ago, it was easy for me to walk to Republican counterparts' offices and compromise or have level-headed negotiations on legislation. Now it feels very different, and it feels like power is the MO for getting anything done in Washington, D.C. Can you share what the Democratic Party's moonshot strategy is for seizing back power in the next election?
Sure. Well, first of all, the strategy is to win. If you don't win, this happens, right? So I believe we'll flip the House. Historically, every modern president has lost the House in the first 2 years, including, by the way, this president, right? So Trump came in with a trifecta the first time. 2 years later, he lost the House. 4 years later, there's a Democratic trifecta. So that's actually what happened in his first term. In addition, every president until now has had much larger margins in the House. This is one of the smallest margins in history. It's a difference of just 3 seats. And what we see is just huge energy now on the Democratic side and also reasonable people. And then you see Republicans sort of running away. So you mentioned power. I would say it's called power and fear. Republicans fear Trump in a way that Democrats don't really fear our leader. And for good measure, we shouldn't fear our leader. But it is a very strange thing to watch how they literally fear Donald Trump. I think that's also driving.
That's Trump has started ignoring the courts. What are you doing to bring that to the field? Because the courts rule one way, you have to do us. And the other big question I have to that is, as I see Democrats approach various offices and the doors are shut, that's not our Constitution. What we're doing to ensure that our Constitution.
I'm sorry, say the second thing, I didn't hear you again.
Democrats, various buildings and offices, the doors are closed to them. What are you doing to ensure that our voices are heard as Democrats on that other side of the aisle?
Are you talking about agencies doors are closed, or are you talking about Republican members of Congress?
To various offices, the doors are actually closed, as it showed on TV when some members of Congress went to agencies. The various agencies,
Right.
the doors were actually closed to them. They weren't allowed in to even have a conversation. So what are we doing about those?
So there were a number of actions that Democratic members took outside various agencies, such as the Treasury Department. The main goal of that was to generate press, which in fact is what we did and what happened. Would have been great if a member of Congress could also have a conversation with the various agencies. I don't know enough about sort of the rules and regulations and what agencies can do in terms of saying, we just don't want to meet with you. I'll look into that. I actually don't know the answer to that. Maybe they can say, we're not going to meet with you. Maybe they cannot. Maybe they have to keep their doors open. I don't know. So I'll look into that and get back to you. Your first question about court orders. I will talk about this most recent court order regarding the Venezuelan flights, but until then, the Trump administration has not defied a court order. What they have done is what any litigant does, which is try to look for loopholes in it, try to interpret it in the way most favorable to themselves. So I'll give you an example. The administration went ahead and froze funding across the board with an executive order. By the way, the administrative order has issued like over 100 executive orders. So there was a lawsuit, and the judge said, you cannot do that. You cannot freeze funding like that across the board. And the administration said, okay. And then about 2 weeks later, the judge gets complaints saying, why is some of this funding still frozen? So he calls another hearing. The administration goes in. The administration doesn't say, you don't have authority to tell us what to do, or we're ignoring a court order. What they said is, well, there's this other executive order that you didn't overturn. And the judge said, okay. I'm gonna apply to that one too. But, so that's what's going on. So they haven't ignored a court order until the most recent one. And so let me just give you a little background on this. The administration is very good at picking issues that the overwhelming majority of Americans probably would agree with. So this issue is deporting violent Venezuelan gang members. Sort of hard to say we support keeping them here. So there were 2 planes carrying violent Venezuelan gang members out of the country. Court says you can't do that without giving them due process. It's an interpretation of an alien insurrection law, essentially. There's a dispute on that. And the judge says, you gotta turn the planes around. The administration did not do that. But again, what they're saying is not that not saying you were just going to, you don't have the authority to do this. What they're saying is these planes were in international waters, and the court doesn't have jurisdiction over it. So I don't know enough about that area of law. I just sort of looked at it briefly. I don't think it's a frivolous argument. So I think there is probably some basis for dispute there. So again, the administration is not saying, courts, you can't tell us what to do, or we're not going to follow your court order. They're giving reasons in cases where they don't look like they're complying. So that's what's happening. Now, if the administration were to say, we're going to ignore a Supreme Court ruling, I think we would hit a constitutional crisis. They have not done that yet. And the Supreme Court, by the way, just ruled in favor, or ruled against the Trump administration a couple of weeks ago on a case.
There's been a lot of things happening. Of course, they're all awful. This past week, in 2 things: one, that court ordered and not listening to them, and then 2, the detainment of that Columbia student in violation of First Amendment rights. Who's going to stop him? Because it all kind of seems like it's gearing up towards a broader issue, that they're going to use these particular issues to go after a larger population of people. So who's going to stop them before that happens? Because right now it kind of feels like they're just bulldozing ahead.
Absolutely.
So we won't get a constitutional crisis if the administration, for example, were to say, you know, we're just going to keep on sending more planes and just outright defiance of this court order. We'll see if that happens. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to appeal this, litigate it, and there will be eventually a ruling as to, well, does the court's order in this instance apply in international waters? Like, I just don't know the answer to that. The first case, or the other case you mentioned, so I'm a very strong supporter of the First Amendment. I believe you have the right to say whatever you want to say, and government can't come after you. So I think what the administration is doing is bad with regards to the Carrillo case. At the same time, there are laws that do in fact say, if you support terrorism, the administration can do X, Y, Z things to you. So it's going to be litigated. In fact, it is being litigated. I just don't know enough about the case or about how these laws apply to know who's right. But what's protecting Khalil is going to be the litigation in the courts. So that's what's happening.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you've been doing in South Bay. My question is, as you turned it, we're in a batshit crazy era right now. So some of us have seen such incredulous changes in what I consider a balance of power. It just seems like we've ignored all that with this new administration. How optimistic are you that we can mitigate whatever damage has been done in such a short period of time so that we have something to look forward to? We don't become too distressed and dismayed.
Sure. So why do you think Trump is doing all these executive orders? Because he's not very good, right, at getting laws through, except for this recent CR where the Democratic Senate did, to be a pretty weird thing. But in general, if you look at his first term, not very good at getting laws through. So every executive order can also be reversed by the next executive. The president has a lot of authority to do things within the executive branch. And that's a lot of what we're seeing. And those are hard to stop. So one way to stop it is, you elect someone else. as president and then reverse a bunch of these orders. So for example, right, all this DEI stuff, the next president can say, I'm just gonna put it all back. But for these next somewhat less than 4 years, it's gonna be bad for DEI because the president can just tell these agencies, do not do that. And they're gonna have to comply. So that's sort of where we are. To get lasting change, you would need a law, right? So you would need sort of a law to pass that does X, Y, and Z, and that will be the way you could sort of get lasting change in the U.S. because again, every executive order can get reversed.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Hi, I wanted to welcome you and thank you for coming here to the first of all, and I appreciate your activism and your articulateness when it comes to pushing back against the presidency and their actions. I work for a global humanitarian agency that is based here in Los Angeles. And as you know, there have been a lot of changes in the USA. I think you're going to hear a common theme here. A lot of people seem to be talking about the legal system and the slowness of its nature. And that is by design. But for example, last week, staff were sending to my state to shred things and burn things. As soon as people found out about it, they rushed to the courts, but it was gone by the time the courts had any chance to look at it or deliberate about it. So I wanted to ask if there's two more questions. First, if there's any way of slowing down, well, or maybe speeding up the legal system so that it is better able to respond to what's being done by the executive. And then I wanted to ask if the Democrats are at least
a lot of people
planning or tabletop exercises or something like that if the constitutional process does come to pass, where something goes to the Supreme Court and they finally say, no, we're not going to follow the action.
Yeah, so on your first question, I don't know the answer to that. I'll look into it. I'll look into if there are ways to speed up court proceedings or court action. I don't know enough, so I'll look into that. So on the constitutional crisis, I think if the ministries, let's say, we're just going to ignore the judiciary, we're going to ignore Supreme Court rulings, then I think the option at that point is just to essentially have mass mobilization, do rallies and marches. That is correct. So just have to be the people sort of rising up and showing that we're a democratic nation.
But have you as a party, both in the House and in the Senate, had talks about what can we do if this occurs?
It would be that. I mean, unless you have another idea, let me know. But right. So yeah.
Tim, you're next.
Congressman, again, thanks for joining us today. And I appreciate that you're one voice out there that's doing news conferences and giving a message to give us hope. But I wanted to ask you generally about the messaging of our party. And the messaging of our party in the last election and now going forward to the midterm. I think the other side out messages us. They lie. They have very short comments that they make that people grab onto, much of which is all baloney, but they do that effectively. And as a party, Democrats, I feel like we have a tendency to nuance, explain, and justify our positions, which are true, but they don't grab that average middle class working person that pulls the lever. And my point is, what can we do? And I know you do a great job of it. I appreciate your news conference you did last week. You're right out there on point. But what can we do as a party to message better? Because right now, I think the key issues, the average voter is looking at us as being the peripheral party on some of the issues that the other side lies about, rather than the key issues that affect everyday Americans. And what can we do to make the Democratic Party look stronger? Because I think there's too many Americans that think we're the weak party. If we're going to be successful in this period of resistance, and then at the midterm.
Well, I was hearing everything you said. I'm looking. I wanted to share with you this article. So I think it depends on why you thought Kamala Harris lost this past November. If you thought Democrats lost because, our brand is trash, we're too woke, we talk about transgender all the time, that's a different solution than if you thought that we lost because we had 20-some% cumulative inflation over 4 years under Biden-Harris. So it is true the other side lies. I think what a lot of voters also saw is that the Biden-Harris administration kept trying to tell people, hey, you're stupid for thinking the economy isn't great. They're like, well, the economy isn't great. So I encourage you all to read this article. It came out in Politico. It's called Voters Were Right About the Economy, the Data Was Wrong. And it's dated February 11th, 2025. And it makes a pretty compelling case that you have all these government statistics, such as the unemployment number and GDP and so on, that was actually quite good for the Biden administration. But the way the statistics are gathered, the way that they're calculated, didn't capture the reality of most Americans. So when you read this article and you look at what the author is saying is, look, if we actually calculate it this way, turns out unemployment was pretty high and a bunch of people were underemployed, meaning that the only jobs they could get were not paying them enough to make ends meet. And then prices were super high. And so I can't think of a worse message than to come in to people who are struggling and say, you're stupid for not understanding you're struggling, right? So that was sort of the message of the Biden-Harris 4 years. If you look at what they're saying. And 2 years ago, we had a meeting, it was a Progressive Caucus. I distinctly remember this. A Council of Economic Advisors president came in and touted all these numbers, right? And so he was done asking a question. I said, look, I think these numbers are great. And I'm telling you, 30 seconds into it, most people are going to stop listening to you because that's not the reality they're experiencing. And I just need the president to start off saying, I understand your pain. I understand that some of you don't know how to make ends meet, that maybe next month's paycheck is not going to cover your costs. I just need him to say that every time at the beginning of every speech, because once they go on and talk about great job numbers, people stop listening. So that's that, but that was a campaign. And even to put even a finer point on this, if you're struggling, a campaign based on joy really pisses you off, right? So just sort of in hindsight, we were way off on messaging. So House Democrats are very focused now on economic issues. We're literally just talking about lowering the price of it, lowering rent costs, lowering energy costs, and so on. So that's what we're very focused on. It doesn't mean that Republicans won't keep bringing up, for example, the transgender issue, right? They're going to bring up bills like they did that then make Democrats vote on it. And so they're going to keep doing this. They realize that's a good issue for them. But we keep talking about the economic issues. And if you look at the polling, some of it is breaking through. People now do believe the administration is not doing a good job on economic issues. And that House Republicans are not prioritizing economic issues. And so that is what we're going to be laser focused on heading into next November.
Congressman, first I want to thank you for being a leader for all these years. There's one bill you've sponsored in particular, the No First Strikes Act, which I love. I wish I would take, rise up. My question is about a little bit different topic. It's about energy and mobilization. There's a lot of energy out there. People willing to, this room is full. There's people showing up all over the place. Are you willing to show up at some of the events, like the Tesla takedown events that are happening, the 50501 protests? Because it seems like having somebody of your stature attend some of those events would give them more publicity and would help mobilize more. That's one thing. The other thing is, I've seen people do town halls in Republican districts. Would you consider doing a town hall in Young Kim's district, David Valdeo's district or Ken Calvert's district. Again, it's to raise awareness that these people are on the wrong side of these issues. And maybe their constituents cheering them out.
In Donald Trump's first term, you may remember Republican Congressman Devin Nunes, who was totally awful, and he never did any town halls. So I went to his district and did a town hall for him. And it was one of the funnest experiences I ever had. It was interesting because I met folks who were like, they'd never met a Democratic elected official before. So there is now so I'm part of Progressive Caucus. We now have a matching program where we're actually matching people up to go to, who are interested and would send them to Republican districts to do town halls. So the answer is yes, happy to do that. I mean, in Trump's first term, I basically spent 4 years resisting. Right? So I'm going to keep on doing that. And yes, so I'm happy to do that. Now, my colleagues, because I'm in a House leadership, I do travel a lot more. So I'm sort of going to other places to do those things. But there's a lot of members just in California who would happily travel all over California to Republican members' districts and do things. So just so you know, what you're doing now is super helpful, right? Because it gives me energy to see so many people in this room. And what you're doing is sort of also making sure that Democrats act like Democrats, right? And if you could also continue the energy, and it's fine to contact me, but also any Republican members, Speaker Mike Johnson, I believe, to me, is a speaker for the entire nation. You're certainly free to call his office, certainly free to call the White House, and understand your power to shape public sentiment, right? So social media is free. You write an interesting post, and maybe a voter in Michigan will see it, or in North Carolina. Think about writing letters to the editor. Eventually, you're going to get published and start changing hearts and minds. And support organizations that are fighting the courts every day, like the ACLU or the NAACP and Public Council and on and on. So there's lots of things you can still do. And to me, the way you keep a democracy going is to change public sentiment, to stop stupid stuff.
What about your tendency? What about your claim, like either Tesla or some of the other protests? It's the same, but it's part of my question.
Yeah, just, I mean, I've lost total control of my schedule, so send me information.
So I'm touching on a couple of different threads. One is, as somebody who is Jewish, it's hard to applaud the anti-Semitic activism of the Columbia University student who is a resident. But free speech is a pretty important facet of our country, as we all agree. I appreciate every bill you put forth, every press conference you hold, every letter you send us, except when it seems only to be asking that money. What I'm upset about, and this has to do with the notion of messaging. I used to work in a media, not in news and music, and we had unbelievable copywriters. And you can't tell me that any one of them has ever voted for Donald Trump or any one of his ilk. And the messaging is almost non-existent. So what I'm upset about is not seeing a unified congressional outrage and huge noise coming from Congress. And hearing, okay, the secret, tell us there's a secret one. We need to feel that there's somebody, when you say something about our leader, we don't even know who our leader is, quite frankly. We have individual heroes and we think are wonderful, thank you very much. But you sending us emails and holding a press conference isn't enough. We need to feel a collective outrage and a huge noise on you, so please help us with that.
I agree with what you said. There is a void at the top.
Yes.
There is no Joe Biden, there's no Kamala Harris. There's sort of no national leader. I don't know how to fix that. And it may not be fixed for at least 2 years. What you have are, you have some awesome Democratic governors. You've got awesome members of Congress. I thought Senator Chris Murphy did a great job today on TV. So that's what you have, right? And I wish there was a national leader. Give me ideas. I don't really know how to fix that problem, but there are individual members of Congress who are out there every day on social media, on TV, saying this is batshit crazy. We're fighting back. This is what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. I'm exactly saying the same thing, only making it stronger. You know, while the Republicans were in office, they had Project 2025 that they were working on. They were working behind the scenes, united. All I'm hearing from you is Schumer's fault. I mean, Schumer did what Pelosi did. He said, don't impeach him because he'd become a hero. And if you'd all united behind Schumer, you'd look a lot better to me. Attacking him for not doing it and continuing that divisive message to us is really destroying the Democratic Party. Picking on Kamala Harris for not winning right now is old news. I want to know, going forward, where's your Project 2025? Who are your people? We send you a lot of money. Is there an organization set up with a spin doctor and an economist and publicist and all of that, putting together a package that's a market that are PG, whatever name the socialist can put, whoever is in the Democratic umbrella needs to get behind something, because right now you yourselves are defeating yourself by fighting with each other and not uniting with a plan. The plan should have been, okay, 6 months, give them 6 months, come out and support. Okay, we're going to let them get their way for 6 months, but we're not going to let them pass the tax bill. We have a plan. These are our steps, and it should be in Politico. These are the 6 steps we're going to take in 6 months. This is our long-term plan. This is how we're going to win back. Who is working on that? And secondly, if you can't communicate confidently with the judicial branch, so you have an issue that you're questioning. Maybe it's the Finance Committee is saying how the SEC is behaving or whatever they're doing, that they're selling crypto coin out of the web. If you can't communicate, why don't we have some structure that we're hiring some attorneys to dig in and get this stuff together so that when we do accomplish the turnaround in the midterms, we have a case. Do we have that? Have you put funding behind that? You have somebody who, you're right, you're not a lawyer, but you can hire a lawyer. Sometimes I don't know the law. I don't know the law in that case. I don't know the law in that case. I don't know the law in that case. We need to know that you know the law. What's going to happen if they break the law? If we have a constitutional, I should know right now from you an answer to that. You should have been prepared for that. That's my opinion.
I'm not really a lawyer. And so, yes, I really don't know court jurisdiction over international airspace, international waters. It's just not something I dealt with, but I will look into that. Now, I've been very clear on the constitutional crisis. I'm just going to tell you, if that were to happen, if the administration is going to ignore Supreme Court order, I think the only thing we can do is to rise up and do marches and rallies and to have people go out and show up and do what we do in a democracy. But if you have a better idea, tell me now. Just tell me now.
Make a plan.
I'm just telling you, we've thought about it, and I'm just telling you that's the best idea we have. But you have a better idea, you know. So let me talk about Project 20. Let me just talk about Project 2025, right? We used it to try to defeat them, right? So I'll tell you what our Project 2026 is. It is to win the midterms. It's literally that simple. And I know it's a year out. You may think it's too far, but in the process of trying to win the midterms, you can then alter Republican behavior right now. If Republican members of Congress believe that they are at threat of losing their seat, the more they feel that threat, the more likely they could actually join Democrats, we just need 3, to pass reasonable legislation. We're not going to put out a Project 2025-like document and let Republicans run against us on that. We absolutely will not do that. And I'll tell you what the plan was on the CR. The plan was to defeat. That was the plan. So we simply did not expect Senator Schumer to go, oh, I'm going to vote for it now. We just did not expect that, but we had a plan. Well, because you would rather, right, not have government shutdown, right?
No government. He's totally Donald Trump and he's in charge because you haven't,
Right.
no funding, so now you just let him run rampant and he can fire everyone, every government officer.
Yeah, so I just disagree with you with that. He has no more authority in a government shutdown to fire someone than he does now. He can deem people essential or non-essential. That he can do. And yes, if he deems more people non-essential, then they will go home and not work during the government shutdown. When the government shutdown ends, they come back. And invariably, as in every government shutdown, they also get back pay. So that's what happens. So the House Democrats had a fundamental disagreement with Senator Schumer that the courts will continue operating in a government shutdown. So maybe the simplest reason to explain why we are right is, number one, Donald Trump lobbied Republicans to vote for this bill. He sent J.D. Vance to Capitol to vote for this bill. Donald Trump criticized GOP Republican Thomas Massie for voting no on the bill. And by the way, here, note to self, never have Donald Trump praise you. Donald Trump praised Senator Schumer for passing the Sierra bill. That is how I know we are right on this issue. There'll be other issues. Now, we can disagree, and it's also reasonable to support Senator Schumer's position. I get his position. We just disagree with it. But that was the plan. The plan was to oppose the CR even at the risk of a government shutdown, because that's what the vote was, right? All House Democrats, except for one, voted no, because we made the calculation that approving this CR would have been worse than a government shutdown. So that was the plan. The plan was communicated to the Senate. The Senate understood the plan, and the majority of senators, Democratic senators, voted with the House. That's actually what happened. Now, you can disagree with the plan, but it's not like there wasn't a plan. Now, there's another leverage point coming up, right? This Medicaid tax cut bill. The plan is to focus to American people like a razor that Republicans are stealing your money and giving it to billionaires and doing that by cutting Medicaid by $880 billion. That is the plan, that is the message, and the plan is to try to stop this bill. So that is the plan. You can disagree with it, but we do have these plans. You may not like the execution of it, but there is a plan. But you have a better idea, I am open to it. Yes. By the way, I understand your anger, and I get it. And you have the right to be angry, because what you're seeing now, right, is literally the administration.
The way.
Yeah. So I just say, I understand you. Yeah.
Feeling this, that we probably will not have another free election. That the midterms, they'll be out there, but they won't be honest. And by 2028, the Supreme Court is going to declare him a king, and that's the end of that. So how do we prepare and how do we move forward to make sure we're going to have midterms so that we can take back this
No, so think of that question. You may have seen, we flipped an Iowa state Senate race in January, a seat that Trump had won by 21 points. And we flipped it. Our candidate won by 3. It's like a difference of 24 points. With the exception of the presidential, no Republican or Democrat has actually questioned any legislative elections at all. Elections are run through the states, right? The states have law authority over elections. There's no national federal election system. So yes, maybe we have a constitutional crisis. Maybe at some point the Trump administration says, I'm going to ignore the Supreme Court. But in terms of the court, Amy Coney Barrett just issued a ruling against the Trump. Oh, she voted, right, with the majority against the Trump administration. The Constitution is very clear that, because one of the best things American people ever did is we put in term limits for the president. That is an incredibly clear provision in the Constitution. No Supreme Court justice, I think, if there's any way they can say, oh, presidents can have 3 terms. By the way, presidents could, Obama would win the 3rd term. That's what would happen if he chooses to run. And there was a poll on that, by the way. He beats Trump 49-42 right now. So I don't think there's going to be, I mean, they would, I cannot see a court simply giving Trump a 3rd term. You would need a constitutional amendment. It would be impossible because you need 3/4 of the states, and the states are not going to do that. Yes, they are. I agree with you. I agree with you. Many of them are. I would agree with that.
Congressman, yeah, getting down to more specifics, are there specific committee hearings coming up that could be really used to whack some Republicans on issues that would be really popular? For example, I got an alert saying, save our national parks, you know, they're going to be cutting our funding. This particular this particular committee hearing would be a place where you can speak out and try or get, you know, communicate and get more people to, you know, try to make them look bad for cutting on national parks. And parks being one of our best ideas, of course. So anyway, are there specific meeting, hearings coming up that could be used that way?
It could be, and I'll talk to my staff to let you all know about potential hearings. The issue is we don't control their agenda, so it would have to be a hearing that Republicans set that we believe could be helpful and useful. So Jerry Moskowitz and I are on the House Judiciary Committee. There's a lot of stupid hearings that majority does, so we've determined that at the next hearing, whatever it is, we're just going to talk about the tri-states. And so we could do that too, because we get 5 minutes of our time, talk about anything we want. Doesn't be related to the hearing at all. So there are ways to do it that way. And then we're starting to do field hearings. So the Democrats have something called a steering and policy committee hearing. We just did a field hearing. It's just Democrats with witnesses on Medicaid and what the effect of Medicaid cuts would be. It tends to get somewhat less press coverage because it's not a sort of an official hearing, but that's another way we can try to highlight issues.
Yes, sir.
Sir, go ahead, right ahead, your next.
Yeah, look, last week, 21 House Republicans sent a letter to the House Ways and Means Committee telling them not to eliminate tax credits for related to clean energy and electric vehicles and things like that. Is this a genuinely hopeful sign? And is there anything Democrats can do to stimulate more activity like this among House Republicans, any across the aisle activity?
Yes, so there are some Republicans that share Democratic views on different tax provisions. So for example, New York Republican members agree with California Republican members that we need to get rid of the sub provision, right, which hurts a lot of Californians in other states such as New York, New Jersey, and so on. So you'll find individual tax provisions where you can get bipartisan support to make it better. And when we do try to work on that, yes.
Great. Congressman, we have a question from not one of your voters, but one of your future supporters. Rob, question.
Most of the Republicans are like, hey, what's going on here? And most of the Democrats are that way. So like, why can't we vote?
So, you know, if we were in a parliamentary system, you could actually basically dissolve government, but In the US, essentially the president is elected for a 4-year term. So that's unfortunately the way the Constitution sets it up. Now, if we flip the House, we could legislatively stop what he's trying to do legislatively halfway through his term.
Yeah.
We also will get subpoenaed.
Ted, this is, bear with me on this one. This is from last month, and it's ancient history, I realize. But what happened is during the Munich Security Conference, Pete Hegseth went to U.S. European Command headquarters, where he was in Stuttgart, where he was met by military families protesting his presence there. This is unprecedented. Military families deployed abroad with their loved ones protesting the Secretary of Defense. Elsewhere in Europe, middle schoolers, military dependents, staged a walkout in protest of the DoD. Other military dependents stationed abroad have been interviewed and stated their opposition to DoD policies who were stationed in Italy and Japan. This is something that's completely unprecedented given the apolitical tradition of the United States military. We know how badly the military is being purged at its highest levels in the Pentagon and the flag ranks. This is percolating down to the units at overseas at the unit level. And you know it very well that the unit level is where the boots literally hit the ground. Something is happening. The use of the military has been threatened for use domestically, and also if our military is weakened internationally, this has tremendous ramifications. So, Ted Lieu, what say you?
So I don't think Pete Hegseth should have been confirmed. I think he does have experience to run the DoD. I think a lot of the actions the administration is taking are totally awful for the DoD. It also does turn out the president is commander-in-chief, and the president just has been accorded a vast amount of discretion as commander-in-chief with what the president wants to do with regards to the DoD. So I oppose a lot of it. I mean, the only way to really stop it is either through immense public pressure or to get some Republicans to join Democrats in passing a law, but it would be so overwhelming that it would override a Trump veto, right? So it's really just sort of public pressure and highlighting the issue. Yes.
Given the fact that we have a president who has indicated he would issue unlawful orders and perhaps impose martial law, I think we need to be concerned about what the reaction within the military might be to such orders if we are seeing such visible opposition to what is going on now.
I was at a panel with General Milley a few days ago, and someone asked a similar question, and I'll just give you what his answer is. As you know, he stood up to Trump, and he said he opposed what Trump did in removing sort of some of the current leaders, but the people that he put in their place, he doesn't have any issue with them. He doesn't believe that they're just going to follow legal orders. He said actually none of them were like deputies in the room when a lot of this stuff was happening first term, and they all agreed with Milley not to do some of the things that Trump had sort of suggested or wanted. So Milley seemed fairly confident that these officers weren't. Just first of all, it's hard to know that someone's a Trump loyalist. Nobody doesn't operate like that. People don't say things like that. It's very apolitical. So yes, Trump replaced a bunch of people, but it's not like people walk around knowing that you're a Trump loyalist or not. That's, in my experience in the military, we don't follow politics very much at all. And Milley seemed to have confidence that these folks would not follow in the legal order. That was his reason.
So many of us in this room are what we right now
Yeah.
have one solution. Our activism chairman, Carol, is busy organizing phone banks to call into Wisconsin for an election on April 1st for a Supreme Court justice. And if successful, the Supreme Court of Wisconsin will be progressive instead of turning conservative. Not just that, it's not just about the state of Wisconsin. It's an early indicator of whether or not our message is getting through. This election is crucial, Carol's doing the phone banks. It's a great job that she's doing. Everybody should be participating in calling in Wisconsin to get the Supreme Court justice.
We need all of your voices in Wisconsin. Elon Musk has dumped $10 million so far into that election to make sure that democracy is defeated in that state. And I'm sorry for, but essentially what we're looking at is women's reproductive health care, whether there's fair maps or gerrymandered maps. And what that means is if there's fair maps, we can look to 2 to 3 additional Democratic congressmen. And that is why the Republicans are fighting hard in Wisconsin and why we have to do voter outreach and talk to as many voters as we can. I'm so funny.
Yeah.
Funny.
Let me just say, thank you, that's super important. Also, this November, it is very helpful if we flip the Virginia governorship.
Oh, yeah.
That also sends a signal. So those are two fairly important races. Yes.
Let's not forget Florida. No, right.
We've got 2 specials, they're very red districts, but yes. That is not, yes. Okay.
Thank you. There are 3 House vacancies. I'm sure many of you have the experience I do of my emails and my text messages asking for support by various candidates for these vacancies. Can you recommend any of these candidates and say, yes, this one will be great, this one's not? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, happy to do that. The easiest way, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, has identified 26 frontline members. Those are members that are in swing districts. We have to hold every one of those if we want to flip the House. Right now, there is not really an opening in a special election in a swing seat. There are 2 special elections going on in Florida, the very red districts. If you want to support a candidate, that's super awesome. I think that's great. I just don't want to get anyone's hopes up that we'll flip those seats. It'll be enormously difficult to do so. But it is the election. You never know what happens in a special election. But the easiest way is to, if you want to look at the DCCC website, I also have my own leadership pad called Blue Momentum, and it can't be used in my district. It's used to support candidates in swing districts. So I'm happy to give you Rob, and you can send it to your home as well.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion. There are 2 issues with my wondering for the final. One is the EPA announcing that they were kind of doing away with environmental protections with resourcing for many years, and that whole initiative with the by the oil industry, and then also the idea of turning godly into a
so on the EPA, they can't change laws. What they could, well, unless they try and get a law through Congress, which won't happen because again, it's very hard to do that. Trump's very bad at doing that. They could change any executive order that Biden had issued pretty quickly. To change a regulation, they have to go through a notice comment period. It does take some time. I'm sure they're going to try to do that in a number of areas. But folks could actually write in through notice comment and try to say why that change is bad, for example. So we're happy to send you information, or I'll send it around as well.
Back on the messaging, because I came from advertising, so I'm very focused on messaging. I've seen this idea floated around on my Facebook friends, and Mayor Secretary Pete is an awesome speaker. Go into the lion's den and speak. Is there any way to get a forum for him to speak daily, weekly, something from Washington, where he can comment on everything that's going on, give the Democratic point of view, battle their points and counterpoints. Give one spokesperson like that a voice to represent the Democratic Party and speak, and people get press conferences every day. Set it up so that it's a media event.
Yeah, I appreciate exactly where you're coming from. I wish that the press just sort of listened to us. That's sort of not what happens, right? So we could set up a press conference and maybe 20 reporters will show up, maybe 2, maybe none. But I'll look at it. We can certainly, all we do is what House Democrats do. We do have studios, facilities. We could set up press conference. We could have people who judge come in and do that. Whether any press would cover it, I don't know the answer. But I'm happy to look into it.
Social media gets such coverage on all of the talk shows and everything. I bet you would get press.
Thank you.
So I have been involved with my handwriting by postcards. We've been doing all of writing postcards to individuals all by hand so that people might look at them. I was recently involved, and I just found out very last minute, which is such a bummer because we all were sending posts. Anybody else do this? All sent postcards directly to Donald Trump on the 15th.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good to know because I just feel like we need to get those kind of messages. And I only received that message myself 24 hours, before. But of course, I stayed up all night and wrote a bunch of terrible things to him. But and how effective is that to get under his skin?
I don't really understand how he thinks.
But he doesn't.
I think any action to try to get press coverage to affect public sentiment, we should do. And so look, I just want you to know, every day I wake up and I read something and I go, WTF. I understand your anger. You have the right to be angry. And if you have ideas, let me know. I'm happy to look into it. All I can say is I will keep fighting, do what I can, but it is a very dark time for us. And I think the best thing we can do is to keep trying to change public sentiment and get more and more people to wake up and to stand up and to speak out. And eventually you'll have enough people to do that you can start causing some change. I don't know why. So let me tell you about the first term. I was really deflated when Trump won the first time. And then I saw the Women's March. And that gave me an immense amount of hope. I don't really know why that hasn't happened yet. Maybe it'll happen.
There was a march.
But not at that scale, right? And so and maybe that people are still recovering deflated, but every passing week, more and more people pay attention and go, whoa, this is not what we voted for. This is not right. And hopefully we're going to get more and more rallies and marches and protests. And I think that is all very, very helpful.
Great, Congressman. Okay, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there is some Republicanism in my back end. And when you think about, like the Trojan horse that has been put on us, and a combination cluster bomb that is happening all over the place with this, taking out people out of the Department of Education and the Veterans Administration and deportations and turning us against all of our allies. Pardon the pun, but that doves don't hunt. We should be able to point that out because none of this stuff helps us be rated. It turns us against the whole thing. And we should be able to say that in a very short way. Let's see. I want to know if there is words that we can use that are very short and precise. When anything comes up, just like you said, the price of eggs is going up. I want to know if there's ways that we can shortly turn against them and get more people to do it. Like that whole middle Midwest portion of the United States. What can we do?
So one thing I've been telling my colleagues, I said, we should end everything we do, basically saying, how does what they did lower the price of eggs? Because none of it does. In fact, it's worse because Trump fired a bunch of scientists and inspectors working on bird flu. So I think focusing on economic issues is important. Something else as important as a message is how it is delivered and through what sources. So this recent survey came out after November showing that Kamala Harris won by about 15 points. People who paid attention to the news, watched TV news, read normal newspapers. She lost, unfortunately, by more than 15 points, people who did not do that. So we're also making a huge effort in the House Democratic side to now get engaged with social media influencers and other social media channels. So for Trump's address to Congress, we brought in 30-some social media influencers to Capitol Hill, and they stayed also after the address to Congress. In total, there were about 54 million views from that, which is more than all the cable channels have. So we're also trying to sort of engage that way with people who never ever watch CNN or Fox or MSNBC, but might look at their Twitter or Facebook or so on. So that's what we're also trying to engage and reach out to people who have busy lives and don't pay attention to the news. Yes.
There's a though that is coming like from Russia through quite a big conspiracy that's big, and maybe that's the reason why they took out the FBI and some of the CIA people that are looking at that at a bigger level. I mean, not just this stuff doesn't make sense to us. So what's the bigger picture? Is it sort of the equivalent of a nuclear bomb being dropped on us by Russia to affect so many things like a scatter bomb?
So I'm certain Russia's doing influence operations every single day. Now the FBI, I just really think it's just Trump's revenge thing. He was super pissed off that he was investigated and indicted. January 6th didn't have much to do with Russia, right? But Trump has this view that they're all patriots and so on. So I don't think that's a Russia-related thing. Now the collateral consequence could be that, I don't know, the crazy folks he puts in might be pro-Russia. I don't know. But I don't think that's sort of driven by a Russian influence operation. I think it's more driven by Trump's sort of revenge tour.
Thank you very much for coming. I'm Dolores Gilmore. I'm Jonathan. Of the South Bay, which supervision on the national. You can speak. I noticed an overabundance of silver heritage work. I was going to say that. And one, I want to thank your wife, Betty, for all the mentorship she does in Torrance High Schools and teaching young people how to become active in public affairs. She actually wrote a reference letter to a young lady that we gave a scholarship to. So, but that leads to my question. Is there an a national operation, a methodology, a thought process to engage more young people in the Democratic Party, to educate people on how our government works, and what can you and other legislators do to ensure that positive messages get out to young people, whether it's through TikTok or they don't like Facebook anymore, so don't bother with that. Me too. How can you reach the young people in mass so they come out to vote, so they register to vote, so they understand? I was just going to ask them. Thank you.
Father, I would have more silver hair, but I actually use hair coloring. So on your question, so again, we are making a concerted effort. The House Democrats have the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee, and they were pretty laser focused on increasing Democrats' presence on social media and on digital media. So this thing of bringing in 30-some number of social media influencers wasn't a one-time thing. We're going to try to keep doing that. So that's one way and trying to do it. We're trying to get outside organizations also to go to various college campuses, universities, and get younger people more interested in politics. It's not that easy of a thing to do, but we're trying to get other organizations to get involved. It is a perpetual problem of getting more and more young people to get engaged, but we're focused on the social media side to try to at least get them content in a way that they may not have gotten content last year, for example.
I will tell you that both of my granddaughters voted for you in the last election.
Question, what's being done to save education in America? Because I work in education, I do a lot of civic education work with my job. And between the gutting of the Department of Education and the erasure of American history across many different federal websites and cutting and freezing of federal funding for universities, you know, what's the opposition doing? Because there's not a lot of noise that's
So to the extent any of the Trump's actions are illegal, then the courts hopefully would stop it. So there are lawsuits ongoing with his firing of 1,300 Department of Education employees. There are lawsuits ongoing with his freezing of federal funding for research. I had gone to Berkeley a few weeks ago and toured their institute that created CRISPR, the gene editing. Amazing technology. They basically have a cure for sickle cell anemia, and then they're working for cures for other diseases. And now they don't know, can they continue their scientific trials? Can they hire people to work on these things? We have to release scientists working on, trying to cure ALS and cancer and so on. So it is deeply problematic. And so there's ongoing lawsuits regarding that. In terms of education overall, most of education is funded by the states. The federal government does have some amount of funding. It's usually not a lot. Hopefully the states will continue to do the funding they're funding, and they might have to do some more. But the federal government doesn't actually have a lot of funding for education. The erasure of websites is really problematic. It's awful. But again, sort of history is not sort of taught through federal websites, right? It's taught by a history teacher funded by the state, right? And at the K-12 schools.
But the funding that's being pulled and for districts turning away from that because of the chilling effect coming from the administration about these topics are not supposed to be taught. Here's a bunch of words that we can't use in federal documents anymore. That in turn has led to districts pulling contracts in my office at UCLA, and I'm going to be out of work in June.
Yes, it's completely horrible.
The lawsuits that you're talking about doesn't do a lot for my entire department. We're 60% of us when you thought.
And it's because there's no lawsuit on that issue, or what's the reason?
So, long story short, the university is preemptively cutting jobs because they don't see the lawsuits coming to fruition in the next, however timeline you have it.
And this is UCLA. So send the information, we'll look at it.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more. I think it's just Congressman's time. We'll have time for one more question.
I will be very short, Congressman Lieu. First of all, thank you, and the House Democratic leadership for holding the line on budget seeker. We all appreciate it. My question is a follow-on to the lady over there who talked about Secretary Pete, for instance, going out as the point person on Fox, and a lot of shall we say opposition media outlets. I will refer you to the very eminent Yale historian and expert on autocracy and fascism, Timothy Snyder, whom I'm sure everybody knows about, who suggests not only do not obey in advance, but also that the Democrats, and he said this on MSNBC and CNN, Democrats should have an alternative cabinet if you will. The shadow cabinet, that every time the Trump administration or, in here, sorry, every time the Trump administration and or the Republican Congress, either house or both, comes up with something especially egregious, that this shadow cabinet should not only talk to the American people in book, chapter, and verse about why this policy or this legislation is so egregious, but to propose alternatives. If we were in power, if we had the trifecta, this is what we would do. So that is actually a concrete plan.
Thank you. So I'm going to do the shadow cabinet. I don't know what it is, so I don't do. So thank you for being here. And so a few things. You have the absolute right to be angry. I am angry. There is no one action that's going to stop this or solve this or make you feel better. It's going to be a series of lots of individual actions here and across America. So I'm going to do what I can to keep fighting, but I just want you to understand what you are doing is quite helpful. Having this many people here gives me energy to keep fighting, and what you do in trying to change hearts and minds of other folks, whether it's in your own family or at your workplace and so on, is helpful. And it's going to be a series of these kinds of actions throughout America that starts to turn the tide against the worst administration ever in U.S. history. And so look forward to working with you. Thanks so much for having me.